Hello and welcome to the Messages and Methods Livecast Live 2.0 live stream podcast, hosted by Encore entrepreneurs Shelley, Carney, and Toby, Younis. We inspire excitement for content creation and marketing your brand and business while answering all your technology and digital marketing questions. We love to help you, our content creator friends, with actionable tips to land more clients, nurture leads, and gain trust as an expert in your industry. Chat with Shelley and Toby live every Thursday on YouTube or Facebook.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. You can see that Shelley isn't with me. And for those of you that aren't aware, Shelley had an elective surgery on Monday and was out of the hospital by Tuesday evening. And she's recovering comfortably at home and may visit us in the chat room. She was in our chat room on our show last night. So if you see her, make sure to wish her a speedy recovery. We have decided that she'll be out of the live streaming loop for the next couple of weeks, just to give her a full time to recover. But she'll be back by mid-September with us, and probably before that with us on our live stream. So, but I want you to know that she's doing great. I spoke with her earlier this morning, and she was already exercising. She was doing a walk around the house. So, you know how she can be about her walk. So we'll see her soon, I'm sure. We do have a special guest for you today. His name is Allison. He calls himself Mike. He doesn't use the full name. And we'll call him Mike. We'll bring him on in just a second. I wanted to take care of a little bit of housekeeping before we got started. First of all, make sure that before you leave today, you take the opportunity to like our show. YouTube likes it when you like us. Share it with your family, your friends, your neighbors, your business associates, the entirety of your social network, so that we can continue to grow the channel. And if you're not already a subscriber, please click on the subscribe button. And when you see that notifications bell, ring the notifications bell, and that way every time we start a live stream, you'll be immediately informed and as a result in the know. And then, of course, I want you to know that the super chat light is lit. So if you want to make a small contribution to our project, go down to the bottom of the chat window. You'll see a dollar bill with a dollar sign in it. Click on that, and the good folks at YouTube will walk you through the process. The other thing is that if you're watching this after the live stream, go to the bottom of the screen, the bottom of the window, and you'll see a dollar sign inside of a heart. That's super thanks, I think YouTube calls it. Same process. And again, you'll get the opportunity to show your appreciation for what we do here by making a small contribution. Really appreciate it. All right, so let me first introduce Mike. Mike Allison is a financial provocateur with more than 3 decades of professional investment management experience. He is the founder and CEO of New Lantern Advisors, an independent registered investment advisor focused on helping guide folks to a brighter retirement by answering this question: what is your quote, what's next, unquote? Let's bring Mike on board. Hey, Mike, good to have you here. Welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me, Toby. Appreciate it.
So I want to make sure that our audience gets as much information as they can before you leave us today. But I wanted to start with that how every interview should start, and that is, please tell our audience a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today.
Sure, and I believe my background and where I am today is very much aligned with your audience, as I understand it. So I'm looking forward to the discussion. As you mentioned, I have over 3 decades of professional money management experience. I retired from one of the larger money management firms and asset managers in the country, Eaton Vance, at the end of 2021. I'd been there for just under 22 years. And kind of a 2-year process of transitioning out of there, transitioning my responsibilities to the next generation and all. And really what my goal was post my corporate life was to work more directly with individuals as opposed to just managing the money, and being closer and building relationships on the other side of that transition from corporate life to a more independent life. And I think that's consistent with many of the folks who are your audience. So began my post corporate life early in 22. We were just a few months into the new firm. I created New Lantern Advisors, and it really is a play on words about shining a new light on what is traditionally thought of as retirement. The financial services industry is, sort of created this idea that you have to accumulate and save and invest to build up a piggy bank to be able to take with you out of your working life and into whatever it is that you want to do in terms of relaxation, recreation, volunteer work, what have you. I believe in a different way of approaching it, and that is that simply retirement from what you've been doing for a long time is just a transition to doing what it is that you really want to do on the other side of that. Many of us have spent decades in the the corporate world, in the working world, raised families. We send them off to college. They graduate college. The nest is empty, and then you think about how you're going to spend the next 30 or 40 or 50 years, and really that's a major part of the way that I like to work with clients, is to really help them focus on what they're retiring to, not as much what they're retiring from.
And Mike and I spoke before the show, and we agreed that his position on the matter is very much in line with what we refer to as our encore entrepreneurs, people who are looking for not necessarily a second career, but how to spend their retirement years and feel like they're achieving the kind of satisfaction that they got, hopefully, during their years as business owners or part of a larger corporation. And I felt like that, although this wasn't necessarily in the realm of digital marketing, I felt like it was important for you, our audience, to hear from someone who's not only experienced in these matters, but is walking the talk. He's actually an example of what he recommends to people when he makes these recommendations. Let's go back. I introduced, when I made the introduction, I said he wants answers the question, what is your what's next? So tell me, what do you mean by what is your what's next?
I think it's, as I mentioned previously, it's really about thinking about what you're retiring to, not as much what you're retiring from, and thinking about what it is that you want to do when you stop doing what you've been doing, and having a really deep, thoughtful conversation with my clients, but also individuals that those are conversations they need to have with their significant others as well, so that there's an alignment about what that next chapter looks like, and it's consistent with the approach that they've taken over time, but also freedom to spend time doing the things they want to do and to not spend any more time doing the things they don't want to do. And to me, that's the freedom of retirement, not a stoppage, but really just a transition to what you really want to spend your time doing and having the freedom to do it.
That's very much in line with my experience, my personal experience. I had a longtime financial advisor that helped me plan what I was going to do in my retirement. By the time I was ready to retire, I was at a good age. My children were all grown, out of college and on their own, so it was a good place for me. But the conversations I had with him, as much as I enjoyed him, as much as I trusted him, dealt with financial management and retirement without any conversation about what I was going to do. And as a matter of fact, I kind of wasted my first year of retirement by just not doing anything, because that's what I thought retirement was all about. You just relaxed, you went fishing or whatever it was. And I decided, with the help of friends, including Shelley, that's not what I wanted to do. Something else. I was still vital. I still had my physical skills. I could do a lot of different things, and I had interests. But I don't remember ever having a conversation with my financial advisor about what I was going to do in retirement, other than I would have what was necessary to keep me surviving in retirement. So to me, this is a very different perspective. And I wonder how your clients respond to you, not only helping them from a financial management perspective, but for that what's next perspective. How do they take that? How do they respond to that?
Well, I think the response has been quite good so far, and it's amazing how typical your story is. lot of people march to this goal of, a certain number or a certain age, and they walk out, and then they're like, okay, now what? And they rest, or they go recreate in whatever fashion they wanted to have time to do. And then after about a year or so, they decide, this is boring. This is not how I want to spend the next 30 or 40 years. I still have something to contribute to this world. And my approach is, it's okay if you want to, during your transition, to program in 9 months, 12 months, 24 months of doing what it is that you've been hoping to have the freedom to do: travel, play every golf course and a golf course in every state, whatever it is that you've really looked forward to. But to me, it should be intentional, and not just because you don't have anything else to do. Program that in if that's your intention, and then know what you're going to do when that time is over. It's almost like you plan a vacation. It's a long one, but you know that when you come from that, after that vacation, you know what it is that you want to start to do, and what your next chapter is going to be. So it could be the day after your quote retirement, or it could be 2 years later, whatever. But my view is, let's plan for it. Let's make it intentional. Let's budget for it, and make sure that that is part of the program and how you intend for it to be, without permanently deciding that my human capital is now worth zero, and I'm only worth what's in my investment accounts.
And that's what's amazing about those of us who fall into that category, is we spent a significant portion of our lifetimes learning, in addition to, working at a business. I was a sole proprietor, an independent contractor, but I learned a lot. And it kept me, I was required almost to stay, in my case, to stay up with the technology, and that has benefited me since. But there's a lot of other things that people can do or have learned, in your case, financial management, that they could take advantage of just to do something productive. And I think that's the challenge. One of the criteria, and I'm going to share this with our audience, one of the criteria that I use when I'm making these kinds of decisions about what to do next, and as you may or may not be aware, I experience a antsiness about once a year, where I'm going like, what else could I do? Or am I doing the right thing? But one of the criteria that I use for this is, how does it help others? How can I make other people, and that's why our focus is encore entrepreneurs and teaching them live streaming and podcasting, et cetera. So that's very much in line, but I really enjoy hearing it from someone who's the financial manager, having my experience and having heard other people's experience. Because Shelley and I both talked to individuals who are retired and are kind of, like you said, not quite disappointed, but they feel like they still have something to offer, and have a way to offer it. And they're more up to date on a lot of the technologies than most people would expect them to be, so they can apply that. And there's lots of ways to do this. I just like hearing it from somebody whose responsibility it is to make my retirement better from a financial perspective, but it's also considering, how does it make my retirement better from a I don't want to call it work. I don't feel like what I'm doing now is work.
Fulfillment?
Yeah, that's it. That's a really good word. It is fulfilling, satisfying, and it gives me a reason to wake up every morning. So I think, if you can help people, if you, Mike, Allison, can help people that way, I think that's a good place to be. And I hope that they take the time to contact you so that you can have these conversations. So each of us has a passion. My passion is, as we talked before the show, my passion is technology, and my interest in communicating and spreading the word, et cetera, et cetera. But you refer to it, I think, as your superpower, your investment superpower. What do you mean by that?
Well, one of the things that I have always enjoyed, and I think I was good at, I was always told, and one of the main or major responsibility during my corporate life was one of education, and being able to take what can sometimes be complex investment oriented topics and ideas, and explain them in a way that make them accessible to people who aren't necessarily investment professionals. I believe the best client is a financially savvy and informed client. And so a major part of the work that I do with folks is around educating them, sometimes to the point where they tell me to stop teaching them, because it's important to me that they know what and why I'm doing the things that I'm doing for them on the investment front to the extent I can, because there's so much mystery in our business, in the mystery of investing, and to me, that's another way of sort of shining a new light, new lantern on the way to approach things. So rather than say, I'm the expert, trust me, I'll take care of things, and sort of keep the client in the dark about how things work. To me, a major part of the way that I want to work with folks, and I want to work with folks who also believe this, is to help them understand how how it all works and why it works. And why is the market down so much this week? Well, there's a lot of reasons for that, and some of them are not obvious. Why does this particular investment strategy work the way it does, and why this fits, is a good solution for what we're trying to achieve, that sort of thing. So that to me has, I believe, and I've always been told that was kind of one of my gifts, which is one of a teacher. I probably was a teacher in a former life, before I came into this world in this life. So I really enjoy that, and I really, really enjoy sitting across the table or the desk, and just explaining something, and then seeing the light bulb go on, and their lights in their eyes kind of say, I get it. I like talking to people that want to get it, and I get great satisfaction out of helping them understand how we're doing what we're doing.
Well, it's noble work. I do want to I do want to let folks know that Shelley is in the room. So if you want to wish her a speedy recovery, you can do that by entering in chat. Again, if you're watching this after the live stream, just put in the comments below. I'm sure she'd appreciate hearing from you all. And that happy face really is Shelley Carney. So I'm glad that she's here. So one of the challenges for me as I spent 30 years with occasional meetings, regular meetings with my investment advisor, was he did his best to advise me of the potential and the opportunity, but he also talked about risk. And I love talking about the potential and the opportunity and how good my retirement was going to be. And I really hated talking about risk. But you've described it in your work as a three-headed dragon. First of all, I want you to explain that, what you mean by the three-headed dragon, the risk being a three-headed dragon, but also tell people how you help them deal with the risk, because that's part of investment. I mean, it's the nature of that particular beast. So what is a risk three-headed dragon?
Well, first of all, there is a way of approaching investing that leads with a risk management framework, and making sure that the risk you're taking is appropriate, and the right thing to do. When I talk about the three-headed dragon of risk, there are three components to it. The first is the confidence to take risk. A lot of people might call that risk tolerance. And that's where most financial advisors stop with their client. They'll give them some behavioral or psychological questionnaire that says, kind of comes up with a score. And so the client says, I'm comfortable taking this much risk. And that's where it stops. I think that's very incomplete, in my view. There's also the second head of the dragon is capacity to take risk. And that's a very, very important element, which is there's a certain time, the few years coming into retirement and the first few years in retirement, where you go from earning a paycheck to writing your own paycheck. And there's that time where it's not appropriate, even if the client wants to take risk, it's not appropriate that they take a lot of risk. So there's this period where it's necessary to dial down the risk in their investments to protect the body against certain times early on in their retirement. 2022 is a great example. It's one thing to be younger and you're accumulating your assets and you can ride out the storm. It's a very different thing when you are taking money out of your investment accounts to live on, and the market's way down, and you're selling assets that are, depleted, and you're having to sell them, when they're down, and then it makes it very difficult to rebuild on the other side of that. It's a concept called sequence of returns risk. So if you retire and the market goes up, for the first several years of your retirement, then that gives you a tailwind and gives you a kitty to be able to not only take money out for your living expenses, but also to not impair the accounts. The reverse of that is what would be happening right now, which is you're taking money out, selling out of your accounts when assets are down quite a bit, and it just makes it very, very hard. So the capacity to take risk is a life cycle question, and it's, to me, an important element of being a fiduciary and putting the client first to say, even if you want to take risk, it's not appropriate to do it right now. Let's really dial it down. And a lot of that risk management is done by not just diversification. That's important, but there are tools you can bring to bear that are beyond just sort of bonds and stocks, and there's other ways to protect the downside in the investment accounts. And the third head of the dragon is compensation for taking risk, and that's just a simple risk reward concept where buy low, sell high. When assets are overvalued in the extreme, like we saw the bond market late last year. The bond market had the worst first half of any year, the worst 6-month performance period, basically in history. But that's partly because of how overvalued they were. Yields were minuscule, and to some extent, equities, bond, or stocks as well. So making sure that you get compensated for the risk that you're taking in terms of returns available. If you're buying good, if assets are attractively valued, then that gives you a margin of safety, to be able to invest into that. And so it's really about getting compensated for the risk you're taking in terms of return opportunity. So those are the three kind of components of risk. And I think it's important that we, advisors, and I certainly try to help clients to understand just how much risk you think you're willing to take is only one part of the equation. There's other elements that have to be addressed. And that great philosopher Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
Right.
And I think we're all getting punched in the face, in 2022 so far. So being prepared for that in the other elements of the risk management is really a key aspect of how I work with folks.
So I think I love the quote from Mike Tyson, but it's also important to remember that these they call them cycles for a reason, right? They're cyclical. There's going to be ups and downs, and
Correct.
you have to find yourself running along with that wave in a way that's not as dramatic as the wave. I filled out one of those forms, one of those questionnaires that you described, and it analyzed me as moderate risk. Well, I had my own company. I was providing for a family of 6 children, a spouse, 2 dogs, and a cat. And so I was analyzed as moderate risk. And I thought, as I progressed through that, once the children were out of college or whatever it was, that I would go to a higher risk model. And the simple fact of the matter is that as I aged, I wanted to make sure that I had money for retirement, right? That I didn't. So I remained a moderate risk my entire, investment life. And thankfully, my financial advisor was very aware of that and maintained a good, steady, watch the ups and downs, let me know when the downs were, would advise me what to do in terms of buying and selling. Although for the most part, I left it up to him because there were 2 things that I was never good at. One is the market, and the other is golf. And so I let him do that kind of business. Well, it sounds like when you decided to start your company, New Lantern Advisors, you had some impetus to do that. But what is it that brought you to the point where you wanted to found a company like New Investment Advisors?
Well, over the course of my career,
I'm sorry, New Lantern Advisors. Excuse me, I didn't say that right.
Over the course of my career, I had a lot of responsibilities in terms of looking after the savings and the hopes and dreams of investors. But I was a step removed because I worked for an investment management company, an asset manager, and our clients really were the advisors who had clients. And what I really wanted to do was to have a more tightly linked and direct relationship with folks, to be able to have a more direct impact on their lives. And in particular, with what I saw in terms of changes in demographics, for example, I wanted to be able to sort of pick and choose, or not so much pick and choose, but really to have the opportunity to work with the folks that I thought I could help the most. And it's, I've sort of leaned into this segment of folks who are within a few years of retirement or thinking about retirement, and helping them understand what it is, not only where they are, but also where they want to go and what's on the other side of that, which we talked about. One of the other elements of it is, and this kind of goes to your entrepreneurship aspect to your audience, that there's financial capital and there's human capital. And to me, if you look at historic valuations in financial assets and historically in sort of undervalued human capital in terms of low wages, whatnot, we've gone through a multi-decade cycle of wage pressure, coming from low-cost labor in China, women coming into the workforce, the fall of the Soviet Union and the opening of Eastern Europe. There's just a lot of wage pressure. And so in my mind, cyclically, in long cycles, but cyclically, human capital is undervalued relative to financial capital.
Agreed.
And we have all these people, and we have 12,000 people a day turning 65 in the US. And that's going to persist for another 5 to 7 years before it starts to taper. That's a lot of people that have been convinced by my industry to leave the workforce and declare their human capital now worth zero at a time where they're about to start to get revalued because of demographic shifts and the shrinking labor force. So to me, a big part of what's next is don't give up on your human capital, because it's about to get revalued higher. And another way of thinking about that is one of the best inflation hedges you can think of, because it's very difficult to hedge in an inflationary environment, financial assets, but it's easier, particularly if you're an entrepreneur, to be able to have pricing power with your labor and the things that you do for folks, how you serve them. And to me, that's one of the best kind of recommendations I can give to someone is don't declare your human capital worthless at the exact time what's about to get. It's like selling a stock at the bottom,
that's right. Yeah.
Buy low, sell high. So continue to monetize your human capital. Find the best way that gives you fulfillment to do that. It's fulfillment and satisfaction. And that's what retirement's all about. If you have been doing something for a long time and you want to do something else, that's totally fine and a great thing to do. But don't just hang up the skates and say, I'm done. I'm just going to live off my financial assets at the exact wrong time.
Well, the other thing too is it's such a waste, and that's probably the wrong word, but to me, it's such a waste of the intellectual capital that an individual accumulates over a lifetime. So not only has the individual accumulated the financial capital to invest in retirement, but there's this wonderful resource of intellectual capital that they can use not only to do what they want to do, but to help other people. I don't remember the name of the movie. I'll bet you Shelley will remember it, but it's the story. I think it's Robert De Niro, and he becomes an administrative assistant. Pardon me?
The Mentor?
Is
Or
that what it is?
No, the intern.
The intern, right? And he's
Anne Hathaway. Yes.
He retires as a CEO of a company and decides he just wants to do something else, and eventually gets to the point where he's helping her achieve her objectives, and it has to be very satisfying. And that's how we feel about the work we do, is that in the end, when we can help someone achieve their intellectual capital objectives, that already accumulated intellectual capital that they have, it makes me feel better about what I do. So Shelley has a question. This is not unusual for Shelley. I'm going to pop it up there so you can see it. She loves storytelling. So I like that she always gives our viewers or our guests the opportunity to tell stories. She says, what is an example of an improvement experience by a retiree who you have worked with?
There's an example, and I think it's not an entrepreneurial example per se, but to me, it's a good example of how this can work for someone. I work with a household, a family. Both the husband and wife were kind of in similar boats, worked for different companies, but the gentleman worked for many years for a company, 38 years in fact, and was sort of ready to do the traditional hang it up thing, and they did pretty well in terms of resources and whatnot, but he didn't have a good answer for, you want to get out of the Northeast during the winter. You want to, have some freedom to have some warm weather in the winter. You want to have some freedom to travel or whatnot. But didn't really have a good answer for what he was going to do when he was all done working for the company. And the other challenge was that he liked what he did. He was enjoying it. He liked the work. It just kind of wanted to downshift. And so the transition that he worked out was just simply working part-time. He had great institutional knowledge. They didn't want to let go, but at the same time, he was of an age where there's still, and I think this is very short-sighted on the part of many corporations, there's still an undertone of ageism when it comes to running people out, and to me that is damaging to their franchise, because as you mentioned, there's just a reservoir of institutional knowledge that gets built up over time and intellectual capital, and you're just going to throw it out the door. And so the company he worked for had the wisdom, and he had the wisdom to say, I can get maybe not 100% of what I want, but I can get 65 or 75% of what I want for another few years by working, say 3 days a week, and and remotely in the wintertime, and I can spend some time in Florida and what have you. And so that was part of the conversation, and not by any means, I'm no trained psychologist or anything like that, but it's really just about having deep and thoughtful conversations with yourself, with your family, I call it the kitchen table committee,
right?
And kind of working it through. And the path of least resistance for him was to just say, I like what I'm doing, but I just don't want to do it as much. And so fortunately, the company he worked for had in my mind, the right kind of response, which is, we value you. We value your institutional knowledge, and we'd like to have access to it. But also give you the means to, sort of transition to a different pace. And to me, that was a good outcome for, an improvement in like I said, not an entrepreneurial story, but it's indicative of this idea that you have this reservoir built, and just because you reach a number or a date, it to me is just so short-sighted to just declare it now worth nothing, or just not worth monetizing anymore. And so that's what I really love about what you and Shelley are doing for your audience, is giving the tools for encore entrepreneurs to build something of their own making. And, maybe they have a lot of, passion and ideas that they never got to put to work in their prior life before so-called retirement, but now they have freedom and enough resources to be able to build that up. And it doesn't have to happen overnight. You've got a runway of sort of, well, it might take me 3 years to scale this up, but but I really am now doing what I want to do. And so to me, that's another way of serving people.
My career evolved in Washington, D.C., dealing with the federal government. So a lot of the people that I worked with when I was working aged with me in the government, right? So I knew people in government who were aging at the same rate and would retire. And over the years, what would happen is a significant portion of them would go to work for government contractors who were interested in having their knowledge about how to deal with the government. They were the people that I dealt with were on the contracting side. And if you can take one of those people who's been doing government contracting for 30 years, knowing all the rules and regulations, because that in and of itself makes it very complex, you can go to work for a contractor and not, because you're not allowed to go back and work with the company, the agency that you were in, but there's nothing that prevents you from sitting in meetings with other people who are selling to the government or merchandising to the government or writing responses to proposals for the government. It's a good place to take that expertise and do something with it that doesn't necessarily mean having to establish your own company. There's
Right.
lots of ways to implement the value, again, of that accumulated intellectual capital. So
I think that's why so many sort of encore careers are sort of consulting and coaching related, because that is a direct monetization of that reservoir of intellectual capital that you mentioned.
Yeah, I have one friend who literally works from her home office and basically attends meetings whenever she's asked with the sales and marketing professionals who are selling to the government, selling and marketing to the government. And she's just there to advise them where they would be overstepping the rules and regulations and could hurt them in various ways. And so her work, and she gets a salary for it, her work is basically sitting in those meetings and advising them of what's right and what's wrong about what they're doing. So you're, I think, in this position, you've established a financial advisory services firm with the intent of helping people to plan out their retirement and have a comfortable and successful retirement. But at the same time, there's this dichotomy of you're telling them don't retire. Maybe that's too definite, but so explain the dichotomy. How does that fit? You're telling them time to retire, but don't retire. So how do you explain that to your audience?
I appreciate the question, and I actually have thought about that myself. Okay, here I'm telling, helping them prepare for retirement and have a roadmap for the other side of that financial roadmap, but then at the same time not retire. Mm-hmm. And I guess it kind of goes back to this idea of financial capital and human capital. And to me, it's an asset allocation decision where if you still have the ability to be able to contribute and be compensated for that contribution based on your body of knowledge that you've built over a career, but do it on terms that are different than you've had to do for the last 30 or 40 years. Mm-hmm. Do it on terms that are of your choosing, both time commitment, location commitment, all those things. To me, that's something that shouldn't just be sold short and stopped. So to me, retirement is a stoppage. It's about a transition from doing something that you may or may not have enjoyed, but it's at least been of great value over time in terms of what you've built up. And it's not just the specific job skills, it's also just life and learning how to deal with people and learning how to deal with personalities and bureaucracy and all the complications of life that you only have if you've lived a certain number of years on this life or on this earth. And and that's worth something too, just having gotten this far,
Mm-hmm.
and so to me, it's the transition to, okay, I'm ready to transition out of doing what I've been doing, and I'm ready to do something new, uh, taking with me the valuable asset that's between my ears, and the body of knowledge that I've accumulated, being a mature or maturing adult, and figuring out how do I want to apply that going forward. And so to me, that it's not so much a dichotomy; it's just a matter of managing a transition
Mm-hmm.
from one phase of life to another.
Well, I think you're spot on when it comes to how you advise people in my age group. Hopefully, the people that are watching this show, the entrepreneurs that we're looking to help, because it sounds like you offer a great deal of help in the intellectual capital that you've accumulated over these years. Let's talk a little bit, and I'm going to post it right now. Let's talk a little bit about your website. I'm going to bring it onto the screen for our audience. Tell us a little bit about the website, what they can find there, what resources you have available to them, etc.
Well, a lot of the content, the tagline is align your financial self with the rest of yourself,
Mhm.
and think about what's next. So that's really the philosophy behind this new lantern. The about page has sort of our story, the origin story, where we came from. There's two components to sort of the practice. One is advisory services. That's the wealth management, financial planning, investment management that we talked about. And then there's portfolio services, which is something that I'm looking to roll out in the fourth quarter, which is a way to serve do-it-yourselfers as well as other advisors on behalf of their clients to do a lot of the same things that I am doing from an investment standpoint for my own clients and my advisory clients. So that's a way for me to grow without having to build, a huge firm and all the bureaucracy that comes with that. And then, I'm very transparent about fees and, fee only fiduciary. I don't work for anybody else but the client. I have no commissions or conflicts, that sort of thing. So I'm very transparent about that. And the insights, I have a blog. I also have a weekly newsletter called the Sunday Drive, which folks can sign up for. That comes out every Sunday, just sort of a Sunday drive around the internet. Some, sort of lighter hearted, not necessarily investment related things. A lot of it around longevity and whatnot. And then the resources and tools are really about educating folks. Just lots of content, around certain subjects that I think are important to think about for the folks who would be, the kind of folks that I would work with. And it's really all about, educating folks. And, like I say on the homepage there, the best client, to me, the best client is a financially savvy client. So I want to do everything I can by way of education and just sort of helping people understand what's going on in the world and the ways to think about things they need to think about. And so that's really, the intention of the website is just to educate, to offer insights, and to give people an opportunity to get in touch and, to have an introductory call, find out if we might be a good fit to work together. I try to be, like I said, as transparent as I can about the folks that it makes sense to work with. If someone is got young kids and they're saving for college and whatnot, there's a lot of good advisors that can help that family. But I'm very focused on sort of the pre-retiree folks, and they may have worked with an advisor to accumulate, but now they've got to make that transition to the distribution phase, at least, and making sure that they can elongate that over a very long lifetime. I'm very longevity focused too, because I do think that's, from a demographic standpoint, investment in longevity research is one of the great investment opportunities over the next 20 plus years. So that's really about the purpose of the website, just to let people get to know me, learn some things about retirement and investing, taxes, whatnot, and decide whether or not they want to reach out and set up a time to chat.
And I went through Mike's website. It's a very comprehensive website. And for those of you watching who would like to get more information about Mike and his company, make sure you go to that website. Everything is there. Last question for you today before we sign off. What are your your retirement plans?
Well, having moved from the Boston area to upstate New York, having the freedom to escape this part of the country during a few months of the year and either spend time in Florida, which a lot of people do, or in my home state of Texas. Although they do have some winter in Texas, it's not nearly as much as here. So some freedom geographically, freedom to spend time with my two young adult children. My daughter lives here, which is one of the reasons we moved to Saratoga Springs, and is in her mid-20s, and our son is a senior in college. So kind of figuring out what he's going to do and getting him through his last year of college and figure out what his what's next is a thing, and just spending time with with my wife and doing some traveling and then stuff. And that's the beauty of this business, to be able to work with folks. They can be anywhere and I can be anywhere, and we can do the same work together.
That's one of the things that we explain to our encore entrepreneurs. You don't have to have an office.
Right. It's not a location, it's a state of mind.
Right.
And there are technology, and I know you focus a lot on the tools of technology. There's, it's amazing how you can spin up a quote business for, a de minimis amount of capital. I mean, and failure rates historically were quite high on new businesses because it required a lot of upfront investment. That was sort of overhead you had to cover, and if you didn't ramp your revenues fast enough, you went out of business. Because but now it takes so little startup capital. It's just really about opportunity cost and time.
Exactly.
And that's one of the great things about being an encore entrepreneur is you have enough resources. Maybe you don't have never make another dollar kind of resources, but you've got enough resources to buy you the time to build what it is you want to build. And one of the great things that I've seen as I've looked at research in terms of entrepreneurship, encore entrepreneurship, is the rates, not only the rates of business formation of folks that are our age, but also the success rate. And it goes to this idea that there's a lot of built up value that we've accumulated over time that can be brought to bear when you control your own destiny. And you're not living in the confines of a corporate structure where, they have the impetus to push down on costs. Where, if you are an entrepreneur, it's up to you what you do and how much you make.
Well, it's very practical and pragmatic advice and recommendations you've given our audience. And I hope they take advantage of getting in contact with you so that you can help others. We focus on the technical and getting them past that. But I agree with you that setting up a business in this day and age is nowhere near the cost in time and money that it was 20 years ago. It's a completely different algorithm. And if you're willing to invest a little bit of money, and at the beginning, a little bit of time, but after that, it just becomes you're enjoying your passion. And if you make money at it, so much the better, because there's all the potential in the world for that. So, Mike, any last words before we leave?
No, I appreciate the chance to chat and hopefully, contribute to your audience's goals. And I wish you and Shelley the best, and Shelley a speedy recovery. And, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us today. I found the conversation with you very, very informative, even though I have been through some of those phases in my own life. And I think your position on the matter I respect your position on the matter. I think it's a good place to be for people in my age group. So thanks for joining us today, Mike.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Take care. All right, guys. Wow. If you didn't learn anything from that conversation with Mike Allison, you weren't paying attention, because I think there was a great deal to be learned from him and the expertise that he's accumulated over his lifetime. I'm going to strongly recommend that you go visit his website. I put it in the chat room. I will include it in the description box below. And I'm going to strongly recommend that if you have any needs in this area, not only for retirement planning, but for retirement planning. What are you going to do in retirement? I think it would be great to have a conversation with Mike, and I know he's open to that. So let me take care of some stuff here. I'm going to turn off the banner so we can do that. Miss Carney, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it, and we hope and wish a speedy recovery. I look forward to having you back here in the studio, and honestly, I miss you. So let's just be blunt here. It's just, I miss you. So get back here soon, even though, what do we talk, 3-4 times a day? But again, thanks for joining us today. I will make sure that this gets into our podcast as quickly as possible. So if you want to listen to it on Anchor, Messages and Methods on Anchor FM, you can do it there and not have to worry about watching the video. There's, the conversation that I had with Mike just now is a perfectly reasonable podcast to download and listen while you're doing your workout or your thought planning. All right. Thanks for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next week. Make sure you join us on Wednesday nights for our new program, New Mexico Day Trips. We'll have another day trip to cover then. If you haven't seen last week's show, and I said last week, this Wednesday show, Shelley and I visited the IATSE 480, which is the Filmmakers Union here in New Mexico, IATSE 480 Film and Media Expo. It was a lot of fun. We ran into a lot of our old friends. We got to talk to the mayor of Albuquerque, Tim Keller. So go back and watch that on our other channel, New Mexico Day Trips. We'll see you next week. New Mexico Day Trips, 7:00 on Wednesdays, and again for Messages and Methods. And I think I'm sure we have a guest for next week as well. And that's Thursdays at 1:00. All those times are Mountain Time, whether it's daylight or standard. All right. Thanks for joining us today, guys. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for joining Messages and Methods Livecast Live 2.0, hosted by Shelley, Carney, and Toby Younis. Please subscribe and leave a comment or question, and we'll consider your ideas for future shows. Share this podcast with your family and friends so they can learn about current digital marketing practices too. Check the show notes for links and resources, and please come back again next week.